They say hospitals are places of healing, but for me, it became the scene of my final breaking point. I was still in scrubs, stitches fresh in my side, the antiseptic sting barely fading from my skin, when my father burst through the door. "Pay rent or get out," he shouted, his voice ricocheting off the sterile walls like a punch. I blinked, too stunned to reply. "I said no," I whispered. His hand came down before I could flinch. The slap cracked against my cheek, my body collapsing sideways off the bed, pain shooting through my ribs as blood filled my mouth. "You think you're too good for this family?" he sneered, standing over me like I was nothing. But as I lay there on the cold hospital tile, I knew one thing for certain. He had no idea what I'd do next. And this time, I wouldn't stay down. It started 3 months ago, when I moved back in with my father. I didn't want to. God, I didn't want to. But after the clinic cut my hours, and the landlord raised the rent again, I had no choice. Danime's 6-year-old daughter needed a roof over her head more than I needed pride. Dad said it would be temporary, but the second I unpacked my suitcase into the tiny spare room with the creaky window and water-stained ceiling, I knew better. Nothing with him ever came without cost. At first, it was little things, groceries, gas, fixing the Wi-Fi, because you're the one using it the most. I paid, quietly, even when it meant putting my own overdue dental checkups on hold. Then came Eric, me younger brother. He still lived at home, still unemployed, still the golden boy in Dad's eyes. I'd come home from back-to-back shifts to find him sprawled on the couch, gaming, while Dad told me Eric was just going through things. Apparently, depression meant he couldn't work, but it didn't stop him from ordering Uber Eats every day on my card, just until his account's unfrozen. They never asked. They expected. Dad's voice would drop into that heavy tone, the one that used to freeze me as a kid. "Family helps family," he'd say. What he meant was, "You owe us, and we don't owe you anything." Danny picked up on the tension fast. She stopped humming when we got home, started clutching her bunny tighter. Asked me, once, if Grandpa was mad at her too. That night, I cried into my pillow, muffling the sound so she wouldn't hear. The week before the hospital, things escalated. Eric had run up another credit card bill, this one from some crypto mentorship, and Dad told me flat out I needed to cover it. "Don't act like you can't," he growled. "You're working double shifts now." "I'm saving for Danny's inhaler refills," I said quietly. His jaw tightened. "What's more important?" he snapped. "Her lungs or your brother's future?" That was when I realized how far gone they were. The day of the accident, I was headed home after a brutal overnight shift. Rain slicked the roads. I blinked too long at a red light and didn't see the truck turning across my lane until it was too late. The impact sent my car spinning. I woke up on a stretcher, Danny's name the only thing on my lips. The doctors said I was lucky. 6 stitches along my ribs, a sprain in my left wrist, and a bad bruise across my hip. They kept me overnight for observation. The next morning, he walked in. No flowers, no, "How are you?" No check on Danny, just that voice. "Pay rent or get out." And the slap. The bruise on my ribs pulsed every time I breathed. I was discharged with gauze, painkillers, and a warning to rest for at least a week. But how do you rest in a house that doesn't feel safe? When I got back, Dad was in the kitchen like nothing had happened. He didn't mention the slap, didn't acknowledge the bandage under my shirt. He just asked if I'd remembered to transfer this month's utilities. "Your room uses the most heat," he said casually, sipping his coffee. "And that kid of yours leaves the lights on all the time." I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. That night, I sat on the edge of Danny's bed while she slept, tracing the pale line of a healing scar on her cheek from a playground fall weeks ago. I remember how I'd panicked back then. But now, my own pain didn't even matter to the people I called family. The next morning, a letter was slid under my door. Not a note, a typed letter. "Effective immediately. Rent will increase by $200 month due to additional strain on household income. Payment expected by Friday. Signed, House Management, G. Monroe." I laughed, Not out of humor, but because if I didn't, I'd scream. I texted my dad, asking if this was some kind of joke. His response came instantly. You live under my roof. You pay what I say. That's how adulthood works. 2 days later, Eric knocked on my door without looking me in the eye. Hey, Dad said you'd help cover my car insurance this month? I blinked. Your car hasn't moved in weeks. He shrugged. Still gotta keep it running. It was like I was the family's ATM, no PIN required. Even Danny noticed. Mommy, she whispered one night as we brushed teeth together. Why does Grandpa only talk nice when you give him money? I couldn't answer her. My throat closed too tightly. But something inside me shifted the next day. Megan, me best friend from nursing school, came by with groceries and a soft blanket. She asked why I hadn't answered her calls. I told her everything, tears spilling before I could stop them. She listened without interrupting, then said, Jessa, you know your mom left you something, right? I froze. She reached into her purse and pulled out an old key. I've been holding this since your mom passed. She said to give it to you when things got too much. My hands trembled as I took the key. It was time to find out what Mom had left behind and if it could finally help me break free. The key was old brass, with a tiny M engraved near the base. I stared at it for hours that night, holding it in my palm like it might whisper the next step. Danny had fallen asleep curled beside me, Bunny tucked under her chin, unaware that something had shifted. My mom had passed 3 years ago. Ovarian cancer. Quiet. Quick. Unfair. She and my dad had divorced long before that, but she never remarried. She lived simply in a small craftsman house left to her by her father. I hadn't been back there since the funeral. Now, I had the key to something she didn't trust anyone else with. Not even me until now. The next morning, I packed a thermos of tea, dropped Danny at school, and drove out to the house. It sat on the corner of Ash and Hamilton, the porch slightly tilted, wind chimes still hanging by the door like they had during childhood summers. Inside, it smelled like old books and lavender. I wandered through slowly her old rocking chair, a half-finished quilt folded over the arm. Dust danced in the light. Nothing looked particularly secret, until I got to her bedroom. The closet. Near the back was an old filing cabinet. I'd seen it 100 times as a kid. Always locked. Always off-limits. I pulled the key from my pocket. My fingers shook slightly. Click. The drawer rolled open with a metallic groan. Inside were labeled folders neatly stacked. Titles like Property, East Oak, Bank, Trust Account, Letters to J. I reached for the last one. It contained 3 things. A notarized letter, naming me as the sole beneficiary of her father's estate. A deed for the property we were currently living in Dad's house. A short handwritten note. If you're reading this, it means you've endured far more than I ever wanted for you. They will take until nothing is left. This house is yours now. Use it. Protect Danny. And never let guilt be the leash that binds you. Love? Mom. My knees buckled. I sat on the floor, clutching the papers to my chest. The house wasn't Dad's. It was mine. I didn't go home that night. I stayed at Megan's. Danny was thrilled to have a sleepover with her godmother, and I finally slept a full night for the first time in months. When I woke up, I knew exactly what I needed to do. This time, I wouldn't just survive. I'd take back what was already mine. When I walked back into the house, the air felt heavier than usual. Dad was at the kitchen table, scribbling something on a napkin, probably another version of his household budget, which always ended with me owing more than I had. Eric was on the couch, gaming headset on, a bowl of cereal perched on his stomach like a lazy badge of honor. Neither of them looked up. "Where were you?" Dad finally muttered without turning. I took a slow breath. "With Danny, at Megan's." He scoffed. "Next time, let someone know. You don't just walk out of someone else's house like that." I smiled. If only he knew. That week, I started quietly gathering everything. I photographed the utility bills with my name as the payer. I saved bank records, rent transfers, even the Venmo receipts Eric sent with stupid captions like, Thanks, sis Chowk. I bought a cheap external drive and labeled a folder. Documentation, Monroe House. Every night, after Danny fell asleep, I added to it. Megan helped me file a request with the county clerk's office. We confirmed what the papers already told me. I owned the deed, outright. No shared title, no active mortgage. Just my name, tied to a trust set up by my grandfather, sealed by my mother before she passed. The house Dad lived in, the one he had ruled like a tyrant, was mine. The irony made me want to scream and laugh all at once. But I stayed silent. Then, something happened that snapped the last thread. It was Tuesday night. I'd just come home from a short shift, still sore, but healing. Danny was sitting on her bed, tracing the ears of Bunny, her eyes clouded. She looked up as I entered. Grandpa said, "If I keep leaving lights on, we might not have a place to stay," she whispered. My heart cracked. He was threatening her now? I knelt down, brushing her hair back. "This is our home, baby," I said gently, "and no one can take it away." She didn't nod, she just curled tighter into herself. That night, I recorded a video on my phone. I looked straight into the camera, my voice steady. I detailed everything. The slap at the hospital, the rent demands, the emotional abuse, the manipulation. I attached clips of Eric bragging on his live stream about not having to pay a dime because Sis covers everything. I labeled the file, just in case, for Danny. I wasn't scared anymore. I was prepared. 2 days later, I called the same attorney who had helped me with Mom's funeral estate filings. When I told him the situation, he didn't hesitate. "You have every legal right to file for eviction," he said. "And given the abuse, you may also qualify for a protection order." I set the papers on the desk in front of me, hand trembling just once, then steady. "For the record," I said to him, voice calm, "I'm not doing this out of anger." He looked up. "Then why?" I smiled. "Because I'm done paying for silence." I waited until Saturday morning. The house was quiet, the sun not quite fully up. Danny was still asleep, curled in a blanket on the couch after a movie night. I made coffee like any other day, letting the rhythm soothe me, grind, pour, breathe. But inside, everything throbbed with clarity. Dad came into the kitchen rubbing his jaw. "Where's the rent?" he asked, like it was a greeting. I set my mug down. "I'm not paying rent anymore." He froze, turned slowly. "What did you just say?" I met his eyes. I said no, again. The room went still. "Is this about the hospital?" he said, laughing dryly. "You think I owe you something for that? You wouldn't even be alive if it weren't for this roof." "You mean the roof I own?" I said, quiet and calm. For a second, I saw it. The shift. The flicker of panic behind his eyes before it turned to fury. "You ungrateful little," he started, stepping forward. I held up a folder. "Deed, trust documents, tax records, all in my name." Eric shuffled in, bleary-eyed, shirtless, holding a cereal bowl. "What's going on?" "She's saying she owns the house now," Dad spat. "Trying to pull rank. You believe this?" Eric blinked, then scoffed. "You? Please. You couldn't manage an apartment lease, let alone." I turned to him. "The only reason you've had heat, Wi-Fi, and Uber Eats is because I've paid for it. Every single time." His smirk faded. Dad moved again, towering over me. "This is still my house. I built this life. You don't get to take that from me." "You didn't build it," I said evenly. "Mom's father did. And she gave it to me. Legally. Quietly. Because she knew you'd do exactly this." Silence. Then, like clockwork, he changed tactics. His voice softened. "You're really going to kick your own family out? We've done everything for you. After all we've been through?" Guilt. The oldest card in his deck. "I'm not evicting family," I said. "I'm evicting abuse." Eric laughed bitterly. "What, you think you're some hero now? Gonna save your kid and ride into the sunset?" I smiled coldly. "No. I'm just finally putting the locks where they belong." He threw the cereal bowl. It hit the floor, milk splattering across my shoes. Danny stirred on the couch behind me. Her small voice cracked the tension. "Mom?" I turned to her. "It's okay, baby." She looked past me to her grandfather, at her uncle, then back at me. "Are we leaving?" I crouched down, brushed her hair back, and whispered, "No, they are." The notice arrived on Monday. Stamped, certified, and delivered by a county deputy. I wasn't home when it came. I was at Danny's school, volunteering in the library for the morning. But when I returned, I saw it taped to the front door. And through the window, I saw Dad's expression. He was standing in the living room, the paper clenched in his hand, Eric pacing like a trapped animal. "You think you can do this to us?" Dad shouted the moment I stepped inside. "After everything we've done for you?" "You mean after you slapped me in a hospital bed?" I said flatly. He threw the notice across the table. "This is war." Eric crossed his arms. "We're not going anywhere." "You have 30 days, I said calmly. "And you know it." The next day, things got worse. I came home from work to find Val, our elderly neighbor from across the street, waiting by my mailbox. She didn't smile. "Heard you're throwing your sick father into the street," she said sharply. I blinked. "What?" "He told me he's been diagnosed. Something with his lungs. Said you wouldn't even help drive him to appointments." Of course. I went inside to find Dad hunched dramatically on the couch, a tissue in his hand, wheezing just loudly enough to be heard through the walls. Eric was nowhere in sight, but I knew he was working the online angle, probably spinning a sob story to his gamer friends about how his heartless sister was evicting him and their ailing father for no reason. I could feel the walls tightening. That night, the doorbell rang. Leah from 3 houses down stood there with her phone. "Hey," she said awkwardly. I just wanted to show you something." She held up a video, shaky but clear. Dad yelling at me in the hospital. The slap. My body hitting the floor. Danny screaming. I hadn't realized she'd been there. Hadn't even known she worked part-time as a tech in that wing. "I sent this to myself before it got wiped from the hospital's internal system," she said quietly. "I didn't know when or how to give it to you, but I thought you might need it." My hands shook as I took the phone. Proof. Unfiltered. Unquestionable. I looked up at her. "Thank you," I whispered. She just nodded. "If he tries to pull any more stunts, you won't be alone." Inside, Danny sat at the table, coloring silently. I knelt beside her. "We're doing the right thing," I said softly. She looked at me, then back at her, drawing 2 figures holding hands in front of a small house, a sun overhead. "And this time," she smiled. The eviction was set for Friday morning. I woke up before the sun, my nerves buzzing like wires in my chest. Danny was still asleep, her arm curled around Bunny, the early morning light tracing soft gold across her cheeks. I kissed her forehead, whispered, "Today's the day," and stepped into the hallway. Dad was already pacing in the kitchen. He saw the clipboard in my hand and sneered. "You really think the cops are going to make me leave my house?" I didn't answer. Because I didn't need to. By 9:00 a.m., the county deputy pulled up to the curb, calm, professional, clipboard in hand. Leah was out on her porch, arms crossed, phone in hand. Val peered through her curtains. I stood at the front steps, my heart hammering, but my face calm. Dad exploded the moment the deputy stepped foot onto the walkway. "You're letting her throw her father into the street. You should be arresting her for elder abuse." The deputy didn't flinch. "Mr. Monroe, this is a lawful eviction. You've been served. Today is the deadline. You are required to vacate the premises." Eric appeared behind him, hair a mess, hoodie half-zipped. "You're making a huge mistake, Jess. No one's going to believe you." I held up a flash drive. "They already do." I plugged it into the deputy's tablet. He watched for a few moments, the slap, the scream, the video Leah had recovered, and nodded. "That's more than enough." Dad stepped forward, but the deputy blocked him. "Sir, if you continue to escalate, you'll be detained." Eric glared at me. "You think this is justice? This is revenge." "No," I said. This is freedom. Neighbors had started to gather curious eyes from porches and sidewalks. Val finally stepped out of her house, her arms folded. You could have worked this out quietly, Jessa, she said coldly. Family isn't something you throw away. I met her gaze. Family doesn't slap you in front of your child while you're bleeding in a hospital bed. Silence. Someone across the street muttered, Wait, what? I stepped up onto the porch, papers in hand. This house was left to me by my mother. My grandfather owned it. My name is on the deed. And for years, I paid for this entire household while being insulted, ignored, and physically assaulted. That ends today. Dad looked around, chest heaving, eyes searching for sympathy. None came. He pointed at Danny, who now stood beside me. You're ruining her life. And then, Danny spoke. Her voice was soft, but it pierced the morning like a bell. You hurt my mom. That's what ruined it. Dad opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Eric stared at her like she was a ghost. And for the first time, I saw it the moment they realized they had lost. Not just the house, but control. The deputy handed me a final form, confirming possession. Ma'am, he said, the property is yours, uncontested. Dad's shoulders slumped. Eric dropped his duffel on the porch. They were out. The house was ours. As they walked down the steps, Dad turned one last time. You'll regret this. I looked at him and said, No, I regret letting it go on this long. Danny reached for my hand as we closed the front door behind us. She looked up. We're safe now? I bent down, kissed her forehead. Yes, baby, we are. We moved 2 weeks later. I didn't want to stay in the house, even if it was legally mine. The walls still echoed with shouting, the floorboards still creaked with memories I didn't want to relive. So I sold it quietly, without ceremony, and used the money for a small rental cottage across town. It wasn't fancy. 2 bedrooms, a tiny porch, lavender bushes out front. But it was ours. Danny picked her room instantly, the one with the window facing east so the morning sun could wake Bunny first. I let her choose the paint color, pale sky blue. Every night, she slept deeply now. No more midnight flinches, no more whimpers through dreams, just the steady rise and fall of peace. I started therapy. For the first time, I spoke out loud the things I had only whispered in shame. The guilt. The years of giving. The fear of not being enough. And slowly, like pulling thorns from skin, I began to heal. Megan came by often, usually with coffee or pie. Sometimes, we just sat in silence while Danny painted in the corner. You're different now, Megan said one evening, watching me from across the table. I'm lighter, I replied. Like I stopped carrying bricks I thought were mine. One Sunday morning, Danny stood beside me on the porch, brushing Bunny's ears with a toothbrush. She looked up, her hair catching the breeze. Mommy, she said, do you think Bunny's proud of us? I smiled. I think Bunny always knew we were stronger than we believed. She leaned into me, small and warm, her hand slipping into mine. The lavender swayed gently in the breeze. The sky was soft, no longer heavy. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like we were finally living.